So, I've been wanting to get a ball python for many, many years now, and this March, in the midst of my quarter life crisis, it finally happened. I got to foster and then adopt this lovely specimen you see here. Now, prior to that, I'd like to think I did a lot of research. I trawled forums, enough to realize that the vast majority of advice on there is absolute garbage, read a number of care guides from different reputable and not so reputable sources, and even checked out some scientific papers on reptile keeping because I'm a biologist and paper reading is ingrained in my behavior at this point. However, despite all of this, there were still many things that completely took me by surprise. Things I absolutely did not expect in advance, and things that I haven't really seen anyone else talk about. So, if you also have a ball python, I am very curious to know if you have observed similar things and behaviors in your animal or not, because for all I know, some of these properties might just be unique to my snake. Let's begin with one of the smaller details, such as the snake's squishiness and the squishiness of her cheeks. Yes, you heard right. My snake has squishy cheeks. Now, it took me a while to notice this because I usually avoid touching her head, as pythons are naturally head shy, which means they will kind of instinctively pull their head away when you come into contact with it. So please don't try and go squish your snake's cheeks or try to boop it on the snoot. Instead, I recommend staying still when handling the snake and letting the snake brush up against you and let the snoot boop you. At this point, I would like to point out that the rest of the snake is actually quite squishy as well. For any French speakers out there, I would describe her as molleuse, and mochi mochi for any Japanese speakers. The weird thing is she actually seems to be getting softer and squishier over time, but I think that might be due to the unique circumstances of her adoption. Content warning, I'll be talking about weight loss of a snake, but weight loss nonetheless. When she first arrived, she was morbidly obese due to overfeeding and lack of exercise, and her skin was quite taut to the point where some of her scales were actually deformed. Now that she has more exercise and is fed less frequently, she has a lot of loose skin. I hope that at some point she will become more toned, but I am enjoying the squish while it lasts. The next weird and unusual thing I noticed about ball pythons is that they have the ability to make themselves really, really flat. Now, despite being as chunky as they can flatten themselves to an extreme extent and then get under places you would not expect them to fit under. Take, for instance, my fridge. I assumed it would not be possible for her to fit under there, so I never bothered trying to block it off in any way. Well, guess which snake ended up disappearing under there and hanging out in there for 30 minutes, doing God knows what. I think the ability to flatten themselves comes from the fact that the python's ribs are not connected at the base, so they can basically splay them out and become a pancake. If you've never seen it in action before, it is quite surreal, and I don't think the camera really captures the full extent of the weirdness. The third thing that really surprised me about my ball python is her obsession with the outside world. Now, this is a thing where I'm quite curious to know if others have observed similar behavior in their ball pythons. So what will often happen is when I open a window to the outside world, the python will react by sticking her head out of her hide and move towards the direction of the window, even if it is daytime and she was previously sleeping. When I open the terrarium door, she will then often stick her head out and remain there, like a horse looking out of a stable. Or she will get out and then actively move towards the open window. Once she reaches it, she will often spend around 10 to 20 minutes sitting on the ledge of the window with her head held high, as if she's taking in the outside world. Maybe she is reflecting on how our socioeconomic climate shapes our current political landscape, or wondering why so many people feel entitled to owning animals if they cannot provide the necessary care to keep them properly. I have no idea why she does this, but I assume the outside atmosphere and its scents are somehow more stimulating to her little snake brain than my dusty, crusty apartment, so she's drawn towards them. It reminds me a bit of the way a dog will act indoors compared to the level of alertness and excitement it will display when it is outside interacting with other dogs or in a forest or park. Which brings us to unexpected thing number 4. Spatial memory. Since we are on the subject of the outside world and exploration, something that really surprised me when I first started to let the snake roam around in my apartment was the extent of her spatial memory. She only needed to get somewhere once for that location and how to get there to be ingrained in her little snake brain forever. For instance, she found her way under my fridge one time. And unfortunately, she seems to have thought it was a great hiding place because now she will attempt to go under there almost every time I let her out. I need to keep a close eye on her as soon as she approaches the kitchen because she has been extremely fixated on trying to get under the fridge again and again for months now. There are multiple other places in my apartment that she also likes to frequent as she pleases, such as the top of the corn snake's terrarium, the bookshelf, and the radiator. What is also interesting is that she will sometimes find a new part of the apartment that she previously didn't care about much and then fixate on it. For a few weeks, it was the top of the corn snake's terrarium that she kept trying to get onto. More recently, it was the balcony, and the balcony is still a place of major interest to her. However, her most recent fixation is actually my bookshelf, to the point where she will try to scale it at least once an evening. Now, this might not sound impressive to you. You might think, oh, it's not hard to remember where things are in a small apartment, but you have to think of it from the perspective of a snake. Compared to how big she is, my place is the size of a university campus or a large office building. Now, imagine knowing the location of every office in your entire building after only having been there one time. I mean, for some people, that might seem easy, but for me, that is definitely not relatable. Upon editing this video, I actually found some studies looking into spatial memory and learning in snakes, which I will link in the description for the one person who is watching that might be interested. Okay, on to the last point on my little list. So the thing that was probably the most surprising but also the most challenging aspect of owning my python was her activity level. Now, ball pythons have this reputation of being a pet rock. That is to say, they are very sedentary, they don't move around much, and spend most of their lives hiding away. Well, while my snake does spend most of her day in hiding, as soon as the evening comes, she will come out and push up against her terrarium glass until I let her out. Then she will wander around my apartment for multiple hours until I have to pick her back up and lock her back in because I need to go to sleep and I cannot let her roam around unsupervised, unfortunately. She will want out almost every evening, and the only time she doesn't seem to be interested is when she's in shed, which can be for around 2 weeks, and then for a few days to a week or so after she has eaten. Initially, I thought this high level of activity might be because she is stressed, but the fact that she eats normally, sheds normally, and sleeps for most of the days leads me to believe that that is just her natural behavior. Her previous owner confirmed that she was quite active with them as well, so I just embrace it. She also loves climbing and will climb on everything. Seriously, she can get almost anywhere if she puts her mind to it. For that reason, I actually upgraded her to a much larger terrarium with more exercise opportunities, but I do continue to let her out whenever I can. I wonder if there are any others out there with very active ball pythons, and I wonder how many other pythons would actually have a similar activity level if given the opportunity to get out regularly. I think a large part of the reason why people seem to think all ball pythons are these super sedentary, boring animals is because they're typically kept in ways that do not allow them to engage in any kind of active or roaming behavior. I don't think all snakes would necessarily be as active as mine, but I think activity level and spatial requirements are definitely something that mainstream snake keeping, especially ball python husbandry, doesn't seem to place enough importance on. And that's that. If you actually watch this video and have a ball python, I would be very curious to know if you were able to observe any of the things I mentioned in your snake. And thanks for watching, I guess. I do make a lot of videos about snakes and the occasional video about like fish art. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, you can like subscribe. Anyways, goodbye. Thanks for watching.